Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 687 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are back just merely less than 12 hours, or I guess a little more than 12 hours after Duke takes down NC State. We had that nice little weird recap for you, like really immediately afterwards, that should be in your feeds right now. You get a second recap of the NC State game. I am Donald Juan. I'm your host for this episode. I've kind of processed last night. Jason Evans is also here. He might have processed last night. I don't know. Jason, have you?
Yeah, just barely. I got to tell you, I mean, the game that had everything. By the way, which was not a great performance by Duke. When we talk about this game, I got more stuff in the bad than I do in the good on this game. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, Towel Mountain, a lot of people love that. But Jason, on a serious note, let's talk about one of the things that we talked about last night, the serious incident involving one of the Cameron Crazies, who had apparently passed out. And it sounds like, I know you got some information, there's some information that's been out as well, that it seems like everything is at least okay with her. Give us what you've heard from the streets down there.
Yeah, I know someone who has a kid who is friends with her roommate. I figure this is, friend of a friend kind of thing, but this is pretty good, pretty reliable information. The girl, I'm told, was back in her room. She went to the emergency room. She got some fluids. She was fine after that. She was back in her room, resting fairly peacefully last night. Probably slept better than a lot of the rest of us after that game. She was, first of all, I was told Cameron was really, really hot. Even though it's the middle of winter, cold weather, Cameron, especially down there amidst the Crazies, was very, very hot. The Crazies were very animated, and I think that ratchets up, the adrenaline, the heat, all that other stuff. It's also worth noting, I was told she was very sleep deprived. That the young woman who passed out is someone who's been tenting, and apparently, and I don't mean this as a criticism of the line monitors, but apparently there were tent checks at like 1, 2, 4, and 6 a.m. last night. Not last night, I guess the night before Sunday night before the NC State game. They did a lot of tent checks. No one who was out there got any sleep at all. And this girl was described to me as she was sleep deprived. She was very, very hot. She got dehydrated. And all these things came together in the worst possible way for her. But the bottom line is, the only thing that matters is she is fine.
Yeah, she's okay. We're glad to hear that. I know Duke, through ESPN, some ESPN reporters had mentioned that she walked out of Cameron on her own power. So it wasn't like we know it was very scary what we saw. And people can debate whether or not ESPN should have shown that. But she happens to be okay. We're glad for that, and hopefully this will be something that she can move on from, and hopefully we see her with much better rest on Saturday, and she's able to go to the UNC game, because we're going to definitely need all of you Cameron Crazies on Saturday. But before we get to that, let's recap what happened on Monday night in Cameron. 74-64, Duke takes down NC State. They moved to 18-2 overall, 10-0 in the ACC. Jason, before we get into the headlines, again, from last night, you put a call out to everybody who sent in headlines, and we got a lot of them. But we also got some, I guess, some votes on what that game should be called. And there was a
Yes.
clear winner, wasn't there?
Yeah, virtually everyone said it is, the Towel Mountain game, the Vomit game, the Malawak Boot and Rally game. There are a million different names for it, but everyone agreed that the game will forever be known for what happened, what came out of Common Malawach in the second half. A lot of people said they were very impressed with Con Knipple grabbing Tyrese Proctor's leg. By the way, it's worth noting, I know a guy who's a referee. He said this was an illegal play. He said you cannot grab a teammate and help them to stay in bounds. But luckily, if you watch the replay where Khan grabs Tyrese Proctor's, there's a referee right there, right in front of Tyrese, and he has his head straight down looking at Tyrese's foot to make sure Tyrese doesn't step over the line and go out of bounds. He didn't see Tyrese's other foot that Con Knipple was dragging back onto the court, but that should have been a illegal play. Luckily for Duke, it was not. But again,
Look,
this game is known as the Vomit game.
look, I know a referee too. I don't care what the actual rule is. It was fine. I would want my teammate to try and hold me down in that situation and have my back. Like I said, we've seen guys kind of pull guys back on the court. Sometimes it's called, sometimes it's not. Sometimes the referee literally throws up their hands and goes, "What do you want me to do about that?"
Yep.
None of that happened last night. It eventually was one of the plays that we remember. And some of the things that, again, ancillary that we will also remember more than others. Let's get to the headlines, and of course, because this is the Towel Mountain Common Watch booth game, I have to start with Dave Jordan, who has a headline. He goes, "Malawach blows chunks, Duke guards rain clunks, but flag throws down dunks. So State's upset bid is sunk."
Very nice. I got some good rhyming ones. I'm going to wait on those. I want to do two of them back to back. Matthew Green and Eric Blumenfeld. Matthew Green said, "Common loses lunch. Duke withstands Pac's punch." And then Eric Blumenfeld said, and I love this. Eric said, "Common loses lunch. Pac loses game. Eric loses years off his life." This was, I'm with it. I'm with the Eric all the way, man. This was a game that took some time off. I got some extra gray hairs. Let's just put it that way.
This is why you shave, Jason. This is why you shave it all off. I haven't done it yet. I'm going to wait till close to the UNC game because I know that'll take some gray hairs as well. I have a couple more that I had. One from my buddy Jeff Lamb, again, in the same theme. He goes, "Duke survives man-which sloppy Joe performance in lane." We don't need to elaborate on that. And our good friend John Grantland, he wrote, "Hungrier than the wolf. Super Cooper wills Devils to victory. Bird. Ugly win is still a win." And I think that hopefully will be, among other things, that this team was able to figure out a way to win this ball game.
All right, I got two more rhyming ones, and then one that's going to tops all of them. Anthony, I think his last name is Jax. Anthony Jax.
Anthony
says,
Sherry. He wrote in once. Yeah, it's Anthony Sherry. Yep.
Gotcha. Sorry, there's a Jax in his email
Yep.
address. So I didn't know. It just says
He
Anthony.
solved the mystery a couple days ago.
Gotcha.
We've been trying to figure out what his name is. We finally were able to equate the email address with the name.
There we go. He says, "At first, Duke felt the Wolfies bite. Halftime, Shire's words, just right. NC State, they put up a good fight, but in the end, a Blue Devils night." And then I got another good rhyming one from Rhett Pitaro. "Cooper was no fluke. Khan was raining nukes. Scion brought the jukes. Man had to puke. The Pack was very spooked. And clutch plays led Duke to another ACC victory." Nicely done. That was longer than usual. And the last one, oh my gosh, Stephen Isagrow, I think is pronounced Isagrow, I'm not sure. He said, "Duke needs a new name. We should now be known as the Puke Spew Devils as opposed to the Duke Blue Devils." Oh my God.
I saw that one. I'm not in favor of that change. Call me sympathetic to Common Watch, but I would love for him to turn around and have like 40 points on Saturday to get past this. But yes, it's again, as I mentioned last night,
the Puke Spew Devils is pretty funny.
As I said, I hope in a couple days that he, can look back at this and kind of laugh like, "Hey, remember when I, the blue chunks in the court during the game. That was fun, but we won the game though. So let's actually get into the game. We will start with some of the things in the good. And Jason, I want to start with this again. It's kind of a theme for the weekend, the Saturday Monday double resilience. Down 23-11, they go on a 23-2 run at the into the first half, to begin the second half, including 19 straight points. And we went from 37-26 down to up 45-37 over the span of about what felt like 6 or 7 minutes. And so I want to commend them for that. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about how we got to that point a little bit later, but the resilience factor is always been there. And we've seen that over the last couple of games where these guys have had to dig deep to fight back. And whether they were tired, again, whether there's some rust, whether if guys were under the weather or just not otherwise feeling themselves, they were able to, crawl down into the base of their soul and conjure up the resilience necessary to come back and beat an NC State Wolfpack who was playing out of their minds for the first 15 minutes of this ball game and continued to provide elements of that, otherworldly play throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I wanted to note. There were a couple, first of all, the defense. This was not Duke's best defensive game, but there were times, especially when we brought out the zone, that NC State seemed flustered. And our defense really did a nice job when we turned it up, when we were playing it right. Donald, you said in the preview that we would hear a lot of bzz, shot clock violations.
We did.
NC State had more shot clock violations than baskets through the first 7 minutes of the second half. I'm sorry. That's some impressive defense. I know the whole entirety of the game. Believe me, when we get to the bad, there can be some things the defense will be talking about. But when we turned it up, and also when we went zone, State was flustered. And then the other thing I want to recall back to our preview, I said in the preview that Duke would dominate the boards in this game, 42-27. I told you that we were going to do this. But this was again a game where Duke couldn't turn their offensive rebounds into points. Duke wins offensive rebounds 15-7. Well, we only outscored State 9-8 on second chance points. I should maybe say that for the bad, but I'm just sort of hitting it right now. But Duke's ability to control the boards was a huge reason why we stayed in a game that we were, to be honest, way outshot, like in a big way. If we hadn't done that job on the boards, we wouldn't have been in this contest.
I was laughing at a couple points in this game when we were playing zone, because if you remember, we were talking about Wake. You mentioned that we had gotten in the zone, and it felt like Cooper didn't know where he was. It felt like he was kind of looked a little lost because it's the first time he had played zone in ever, right? I wonder if this was intentional, because there was a point where it felt like you mentioned NC State being flustered. It looked like our zone for the first couple of times we used it was very much intended to be helter-skelter. You saw guys kind of pointing at each other like, no, you're supposed to be over here. You're supposed to be over there. You're supposed to be up top. I'm supposed to be down low. And you could see that they were doing that, and NC State's passing the ball around like, what are they doing? What is going through their mind right now? Because it doesn't look like they're on the same page. And by the time they kind of figured out that, yes, they were on the same page, they were trying to do that. Here comes the shot clock going down to 2 and then 1, and then they're trying to shoot something from 35 feet. I don't know if this was intentional, but it felt like it was meant to kind of throw them into out of whack and kind of get them off of their game, startle them, whatever you want to do. But the idea that they were able to be effective in showing kind of a discombobulated version of a zone intentionally, I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, and continuing on that same theme, I want to kind of tie this into the play of Big Pat Ngamba, because he is honestly still very much a work in progress on defense, especially in man-to-man. Sometimes it's fine, but sometimes it's a problem. And I did think, though, that he worked really well, moved really nicely when we were in a zone. Now, part of that is his only job in a zone is sort of to stand underneath the basket and shuffle side to side in the lane and make sure that everything's okay in there, while his 4 long-armed, elite defensive teammates, because he at all times he is surrounded in a zone by 4 guys who are very long, very tall, have great defensive instincts. He's surrounded by those guys, and they form a nearly impenetrable shield around the lane that, to honestly, Pat doesn't have to do all that much other than grab a rebound and make sure that nobody slips to the baseline. The other thing about the zone was I noticed they started out in a 2-3. I'm not going to say they switched to a 1-3-1, but it started to look almost like a 1-3-1 because they were sagging off a little bit into that foul line area where teams like to get the ball against a zone. And Duke was like, no, we're not going to let you get it there. You have to play outside. You have to play, this area is ours. You can have all that area out there where there are no good shots to be taken. And I think Duke sagging a little bit, again, it sort of took on the shape of a 1-3-1. I think, I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if that's a wrinkle that Shire put in place or if it's just like how these guys reacted instinctively to where State was trying to get the ball. But I thought that made it even more effective when we dropped a guy back to that free throw line to keep State from getting the ball inside at the spot that they wanted.
I want to stay on the defense because I think one of the sparks for our defense at times was a guy who didn't play. Malik Brown dressed last night. He did not play, but he was in uniform and he went through some of the warm-ups. I think afterwards, when we were kind of going off on a riff on our little immediate recap last night, John Shire mentioned that Malik has not practiced yet. He has been working out solely with the medical team, but he wanted to get him out there just to, start him to get through those motions, and he's going to start practicing this week to see if he could go for UNC. But the one thing, Jason, that we have not done well since he's been out has been getting our hand in passing lanes and stealing the ball. Well, we had 8 steals last night, which is a very big boost from what we were doing. We were, having games where we had 2 or 3 maybe in a game. 8 in one game. I'm feeling much better about the fact that they were getting takeaways. And yes, maybe we weren't going down and getting immediate points off of them because of how we were shooting, but that bodes well for when he comes back. We have guys who are active in the passing lanes, and most importantly, they are starting to learn how to play defense without Malik Brown in there, but playing the style of defense that Malik Brown is known for. Because when he comes back in, we're going to get back to that sort of defensive shape. And the fact that other guys are getting their hands in passing lanes, they were actively trying to get steals, they were picking up the ball, going the other way. That's going to be how we beat some of these, teams in these, bigger games that we're going to have down the road, right? Those few, we say the few left, but every game there's going to be guys who want to take us out. To do that, to take the ball away from them, is a different type of momentum shift than it is for them to throw the ball out of bounds or for us to get a rebound off of a missed shot.
Yeah, what you're talking about there is that amazing steal that Sion James had.
Yeah,
yeah. There was a 1-minute stretch where Sion had the steal. Tyrese had a ball he drove underneath that he flipped out to Khan for a 3. It had everything working. It unfortunately kind of ended when Man took a bad 3-pointer that touched nothing at all. Again, I'll get to that more in the bad. But it was a really great for 1 minute. There in the first half. Duke looked absolutely fabulous. But I want to.
They also had that one, Jason, where it kind of, I think Duke even posted it. It was that one where, Tyrese Proctor steals it. He goes the length of, he kind of like picks up. It's kind of like a helter-skelter kind of play. He goes to the lane. He misses the layup. Man gets the rebound. They kind of pass it out to Khan, who tries to take a layup. He misses. I think Man gets the board again. Passes it off to Cooper, who had that, absolutely vicious, like if he had landed that dunk, right? Like,
oh my
that one
God, yeah.
would have, tore the place down. But it was a signal, like they all looked at each other like, see, we're just right there. And I think that was the thing, was usually we're finishing that play up, 20 seconds earlier. But the fact that they were continuing to post, that was in the middle of that 19-0 run that we had. So they were starting to feel, hey, if we just keep doing this, it's going to break through and we're going to get the comeback.
Actually, the play you're talking about was not in the middle of that. The
run
was it?
Yeah.
But it was a little mini run that helped Duke stem the tide when NC State was beginning to really stretch things out a little bit. I want to get to an individual player, and the first guy I'm going to talk about is Cooper Flagg, who had 23 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block in the second half.
Yeah.
In one half of basketball, 23, 5, and 2. Are you kidding me? For the game, 28, 7, and 3. He also drew 11 fouls. I've talked about this a few times on this podcast. Cooper's ability to put the defense in a bad position and get them in foul trouble is elite. I talked last game. He did the same thing to Trevon Spillers. Got him in foul trouble. Trevon Spillers didn't play hardly at all in the first half. for Wake because Coop got him in foul trouble so quickly. In this game, it was Dontrez Styles that Coop got in foul trouble. And Styles had a hell of a game, probably the best game of his entire college basketball career. But Coop, he put pressure on him constantly. He got Styles in foul trouble. It meant that when State needed Styles, they couldn't go to him as much as they wanted to. And at one point in the second half, Cooper Flagg had a personal 10-0 run. He was all of our offense for long stretches of this game. It's remarkable what he's turned into. I think folks need to understand that when we talked about this a little bit over the summer, Donald, we didn't expect Cooper Flagg to come in and average 20 points per game. I think you and I each specifically said that's not the kind of player he is. He's going to distribute. He's going to be a pest all the time on defense. He's going to grab rebounds. He's going to score some, but he's not going to be this unbelievable scorer. We were wrong. We were just wrong.
I think our when we picked points per game, we were all picking like 18 or some of that, which is not like super otherworldly, right? Like it's in line with what, a lot of guys have led Duke with the last couple of years. Cal Filipowski, Paulo Banchero, they were averaging 18, 19 points per game. So you're like, yeah, he'll have some games where he'll ball out. But we also said that there's going to be games where he has, 10 points and 13 rebounds and 8 assists, right? So we had those, and we've seen that from him. We've had games where he doesn't score as many points, and then he kind of goes,
not
lately, right? It's like
since the calendar turn, he's been a whole.
It's really half. It's really by half, right? He'll 5 points in the first half, but he had 5 assists or 3 assists and 5 rebounds, and then he goes, yeah, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to score. He scores 23 points.
Yeah, it was super impressive. And then the other guys I want to shout out in terms of scoring were Khan and Sion, who, we really needed them because frankly, no one else in the team was able to provide much of anything. They actually were our leading scorers in the first half. Khan Knippel had 11 points. Sion James had 7, and it continued in the second half. Khan had 8 more in the second half. Sion had 6. It was for Sion, 13 points was a high watermark for him at Duke. And it felt to me like several of Sion's buckets came at really important times. He had that basket, that 3-point play on an offensive rebound toward the end of the first half. It was really important to get us closer to sort of, we'd started a little run. It allowed us to go into halftime really feeling good about where we were. And then we came out of the locker room and immediately, put it on NC State and grabbed a lead that we would never give up. But I thought Khan and Sion stepped up in a game where there were not a lot of other guys stepping up on offense.
Can I talk about the thing that I think won us this game? It's the free throw line. The fact that is, if you look at the stats, call. NC State and Duke had the exact same amount of field goal attempts. NC State made 1 more than Duke. They made 6 more threes, but NC State went 6 for 7 from the line, and we went 24 for 28. So like you said, you mentioned Cooper Flagg. I think this is at least the second game that he has drawn double-digit fouls. He had that one game where he had 13 that he drew on the other team. But the fact that we were able to get to the line and we were most importantly knocking those down, that was the game. And yes, when your shooting is not working, when you're not, or it doesn't feel like a lot of things are going right, we even had a stretch where it felt like we weren't making, I think we made 1 or 2 field goals, but we were getting to the line. And the reason why we were able to kind of stay with it was the fact that we were able to knock down our free throws when we got those opportunities. And we had a lot of them. 28 free throws is a ton, but that also meant we were aggressive at getting to the rack, aggressive at, there very few of those fouls were stupid fouls, except for that one where Cooper had the 3, and I think was it Middlebrooks or someone just got in his face for no reason.
Yeah.
Sure, we'll take that 4-point play every day, but they were knocking those free throws down, and down the stretch when NC State was trying to get back into it and make it close, our free throws are what put the game away.
Yeah, I got one last thing I want to mention in the good. John Shire started out his press conference. He started out actually by saying that Kamen Malawach is going to be fine. He cramped up a bit, drank a little too much. But Shire immediately segued from that to praising what he said were the young guys. And I don't really think he means Cooper Flagg or even Con Knippel there. I think that was his way of saying Big Patrick Gongba, had a really nice end to this game. When Man went down and we had to rely on Patrick, he was there for us. And I guarantee you, 2 weeks ago, John Shire did not expect Big Pat to be a key player down the stretch in back-to-back games the way he has against Wake and now NC State. I mean, Pat was huge, and he just has really, really great hands. And you can see that he's such a different player from Man Man. Um, those hands, his ability he moves his body really well. He finishes, so tenderly. Is tenderly the wrong word?
Gracefully.
Gracefully. There we go. That's a little bit better. I'm just very, very impressed. I know that he's a guy who, when Malik Brown comes back, his minutes are going to dry up a bit, and you're probably going to see big games where we don't see a lot of Big Pat, if at all. I think it's just tough for a team to go 10 or 11 guys deep. It's not realistic to expect John Shire to try to do that. And frankly, Pat isn't at the point yet where he deserves to take minutes away from Malik Brown and Patrick Gongba. But it's nice to know that when we need him, he can be there for us. And he had a huge play, and it was a high intelligence play, high basketball IQ play, I should say, on that basket he scored with Cooper Flagg that sealed the game for all intents and purposes for Duke. Got to be a little bit of a dream for a kid like that, who struggled a bit with minutes and has struggled with injuries over the past couple of years to have that in a huge contest with the Crazies going just, wild around him.
It wasn't just John Shire who singled him out. Also, Sion James afterwards talked about his play and saying that he was huge, and the fact that he, didn't play a lot early in the season, and he's like, that's just how it goes sometimes. But the coaches trust him, the players trust him, and he has responded by being ready for those big minutes. And like we kind of said a couple weeks ago, right? We said, hey, if there's somebody that it steps up from deep on the bench, if something were to happen, that's going to prove wonders, because that way you don't have to worry about when we get into foul trouble. We know we can go a little bit further deep if it's necessary. We don't like that Malik Brown was out, but if the biggest lesson that we learned from that is the emergence of Pat Gongba to be a guy that we can trust for 2 to 3 minutes at a time, I think that's a great development for this team, because it just gives, again, if you have confidence all the way down to your 10th guy, that way you have those options in an NCAA tournament game where, as we've said, anything can happen. Foul trouble happens, quirky things happen, and all of a sudden you may be relying on that guy who is your 9th or 10th man to carry you for a few minutes. We've seen it happen for all these teams that have done so well in the tournament, and so the fact that we have a guy ready for that bodes wonders. So let's leave the good here. We'll pause for a quick break. On the other side, we'll get to all the other stuff about this game, including what we need to improve on as we look forward to the game on Saturday against UNC. We are back, and Jason, we turn our attention to things we need to improve, and I'm just going to start with a 4-letter word: trap. This was a trap game, unfortunately, and the fact is that after 10 minutes, we were down 23-11. We had those shooting woes. We weren't as efficient as we normally are. If you think about KenPom, we dropped from 1 overall to 3 overall after this game, and mainly it was due to the inefficiencies that we saw on the shooting end of the floor.
Yeah, this game was hell in our advanced metrics.
Yes.
Bart Torvik, he gives every game a game score. You're like, how efficient, how good do you play in this game, regardless, win, loss, whatever. He gave us a game score of 76. That is far and away our worst game score of the entire season. Let me put this in perspective for you. The loss to Kansas was an 87. That was our previous worst game score. The loss to Kentucky was a 91. This game, a 76. And you're correct. We fell from number 1 to number 3 in the KenPom rankings. Although it's worth noting that Duke, Auburn, and Houston are basically so close that in one game they're going to bounce around a little bit. But that said, Donald, 4 of our past 5 games have been pretty subpar. We only beat Notre Dame by 8 as they went hog wild from 3. Yes, we crushed Miami, a team that appears to be completely broken. But after that BC game was just a 4-point game at the half. We then played Wake. They went on a 25-4 run. Wake had a lead, until like 6-7 minutes left in that game. And now NC State. And NC State is the worst of all those teams. And that was the worst game of all of them. I don't know. Is it some Malik Brown effect? Over those 5 games that Malik Brown has missed, I mean, he played, 1 minute, less than a minute against Notre Dame. Over those 5 games, Duke, according to Bart Torvik, has been the 24th best team in college basketball. Our defense has barely been top 30 during that time. Torvik says that both Clemson and Louisville have been better teams than Duke over the stretch of these past 5 games. Can we get Malik Brown back pretty soon, please? Please?
Yeah, and I think it also leads to another thing that I think, again, we said it would happen. We opined that this is something that happens all the time when you have a Saturday, Monday double, especially when you're in the midst of, again, trying not to look ahead, but at the same time, you're competing with in-state rivals in this big 4 week that we kind of have. And that is the fact that these guys look tired. They look gassed at certain points of the game.
Big time.
Man played 25 minutes, and I mean, he sat out the last 4 minutes of the game because he blew chunks, right? But this is not a criticism of the fact that he played 25 minutes, because we think that that's where he needs to be. But it also just shows you how much energy that these guys expended against Wake Forest, and then to come back and do the same thing against NC State with the slow starts. And the slow starts are, remember, we tried to catch up against Kentucky. We tried to catch up against Kansas, and we spent so much energy trying to do it that when we got that last haymaker in and then they launched one of their own, we were not able to recover from that. That is how you lose in the NCAA tournament, is not being mentally sharp from the get-go. And that is where this team, who is still, young by some stretches and veterans in other stretches, that is what they need to overcome, in my mind, is those games where you need to have a mental edge to kind of get over a hump of whatever. I know people looked at this game and said, oh, it's NC State, we should be able to take care of them. But remember, NC State took us out twice last year, and they took us out because we underestimated them, and they punched us in the mouth. They did that again last night, and thankfully we were able to overcome that. But we have to start to really generate the mental toughness that the rest of the season is going to require, because it does not get easier from here.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the shooting. And by shooting, I mean our opponent's shooting. I'm getting a little sick of these mid-level ACC teams like NC State and Notre Dame having out-of-body experiences from 3 against us. I mean, like, it's one thing I will fully admit, we're in the bad. And I will admit that Duke did not do a good job of closing out, of stopping good looks from NC State. They threw in some BS shots, but they also got some good looks against us until we went zone and confounded. By the way, Jim Boeheim. If Jim Boeheim saw this Duke team, he would install a zone that would destroy the world, because they're so long. He loves long players. Mm-hmm. Jim Boeheim. But other than when we were playing zone, felt like State was getting good looks against us a lot. I want folks to understand something about NC State. So they went 10 of 22 from 3-point range against Duke, 45.5%, 45.5%. Their previous 2 games, against SMU, they were 4 of 24. That's 16%. Against Cal, they were 1 of 10. That's 10%. Some team that's shooting like 12, 13% from 3 is suddenly hitting 45% against Duke. I'm sick of this. But I do want to give full credit. Let's be honest. Dontrez Style and Trey Parker had a hell of a game. By the way, Trey Parker, not to be confused with the Trey Parker who created South Park. This is not the same person.
Very different guy.
Very different guy. Dontrez Style just went bootsy on us, went bootsy Thornton. And as for Trey Parker, I didn't mention him at all in the preview. You know why, Donald? Because he doesn't play. I don't understand what happened in this game. He scores 15 points against Duke. That's more points than he scored in every game they've played since December 4th combined. You take every game they played since December 4th, add them all up. He had more points against Duke than he did in all those other games. We're talking about a guy who played 3 minutes against SMU, just 2 minutes against a week ago against Cal, didn't play against UNC, wasn't in the game against UNC or Notre Dame. He was hog wild against Duke for 15 points in 18 minutes. On the season, the dude is hitting like less than 25% from 3. He goes 3 for 4 from 3 against us. I don't know what it is. I'm just getting sick of guys who are bad shooters, teams who are bad shooters, shooting bad against Duke. Now, I say that Wake Forest is also a team that's a bad shooter. They shot poorly from three. So it doesn't happen every game, but I'm sick of it happening more often than it should.
Well, it's also because like when we preview, we kind of key in, you kind of key in on a few guys. You're like, hey, these are the heads of the snake, right? Cut these guys off from shooting and scoring. Then, Duke is going to have a pretty easy time of it. And it's that guy who, once you cut it off, right, you say, okay, these top three guys not doing anything on us. And a couple of those guys didn't. But then you have this guy who, Trey Parker, you mentioned he had scored more points in this game than the last like month and a half combined. That number was 15. He scored 15 points last night. It's not like he scored 35 or like something like that, right? He scored 15 points. So this is a guy who's very little used, who came off and, as we kind of need to expect, had a good game against Duke. Everyone wants to have that good game against Duke and help lead their team to that upset win. And he wanted to be that guy, and he was hitting shots as if he was that guy. That is how you have to approach every single game from here on out, because he's not going to be the last guy who comes off the end of the bench to try and shoot their way into glory, so to speak. But I will say, hats off to them, because they shot well. And despite the fact that some of the shots were at the end of shot clocks or kind of circus shots, they went in. And as anyone will tell you, it's not a bad shot if it goes in the hoop. So I am I'm impressed with what they were able to do. Keats had them ready to go. And so again, coming off of, they had their own Saturday, Monday double. So, and they looked every bit the more livelier of the group of the teams on the floor when we were playing them.
So the next thing I wanted to mention in the bad is our bench play. We were outscored by NC State, crushed in bench points, 25-6. Now, I know that Trey Parker was a large part of that, but just 6 points from our bench. Ugh. We had a listener, Landon Harris. Landon wrote to us and pointed out that Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster have now combined for just 10 points in Duke's last two games. And he then noted that Isaiah Evans seems to have become a bit of an afterthought. I mean, Isaiah played just 4 minutes against Wake, just 3 minutes here against State. Those are Isaiah's lowest minute totals since his coming out party against Auburn. I wonder maybe if John Shire forgets a little bit about Isaiah. And the pity with that is, and I really noticed this during this game, Donald, there's some guys on Duke that are becoming a little bit gun shy. And that's something Isaiah Evans is not. But Proctor, Foster, I felt like I saw it a little bit from Mason and Sion, maybe even a touch from Kahn. I mean, there was a moment in the game where Cooper had to tell Kahn, come on, man, I need you to score.
Come shoot that. Yeah,
go shoot
I remember that.
I feel like that some of these guys, like I noticed last night, that guys would have a good shot and they go, no, you know what? If we keep moving the ball, we'll get a better shot. And we keep looking for that better shot. And then suddenly the shot clock is almost expired and Duke is firing up a desperation shot. And frankly, we had a couple shot clock violations. On those plays, there were times earlier in the shot clock where Duke had a shot and chose not to take it. These guys can't be gun shy. One of the most shocking statistics in this game, Donald, in the second half, Duke only shot 4 3-pointers. We were just 1 of 4 on 3-pointers. This is a Duke team that usually takes more than 45% of their shots from 3-point range. And the second half against NC State, only 4 3-pointers. I'm going to tell you a little hint about analytics, folks. The analytics say, take a 3. If you've got a good 3, take it. The Boston Celtics are winning NBA titles by taking every damn 3-pointer they can find. And that's what Duke has been doing for the most part this season. And we suddenly abandoned it in the second half against NC State. Now, I know we abandoned it because we were getting to the rim. Cooper Flagg especially was getting in the lane. Con Knipple, guys got in the lane. And yes, I like that. But you can't give up the 3-pointer completely, especially the guys on Duke who were shying away from taking threes, open threes, because they thought, oh, we'll get something better a little bit later in the shot clock. And it turned into a problem for Duke in this game. It shouldn't have been as close a game as it was if Duke gets more good opportunities from 3, like they have in virtually every other game this season.
And let's be clear, we like when they're moving the ball around, and there's a point where you can become too unselfish. It's not.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but of course, like the situation is right. Like you have this saying, 1 in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? And you say, hey, or just like when you win the lottery, they say take the lump sum because $1 billion now is not going to be $1 billion down the road,
Yep.
because of inflation. A great shot now is not as great, may not be a great shot later in the shot clock because you have the inflated pressure that comes with the fact that you are now getting the ball with less than 1 second on the shot clock as opposed to 20 seconds on the shot clock. So that's why we say sometimes, hey, like that shot the other day that Mason Gillis took with 20 seconds left. You're like, yo, that's a terrible shot. Like, hold the ball a little bit. No, he said that is the best shot at this time. I'm taking it because I don't know if we're going to get this 20 seconds from now. And that's fine. You need to kind of have that balance. And I think the idea is, I love the fact that they're moving the ball around. The idea that we made baskets mostly based on the assists is great. It's when we are stagnant that we start missing shots. And it's not reflected in the stat sheet because when you look at the stats, you see we had 15 assists or 13 assists on 23 made baskets. About 40% is less than what we're normally doing. But again, it was a lot of the times where we were stagnant and just trying to take it to the rim ourselves without trying to pass the ball around. That's when we got into trouble. And that's when we missed shots. But I like the fact I want them to continue to find the open look. But when you see it at a certain point, you do got to take it. And I think that's the key here.
Yeah, by the way, just so we have the exact number, Duke had 10 assists on 23 made baskets in this game.
Yes, thank you.
43% assist rate, and usually Duke is higher than 43% on our assist rate. Hey, there's one last thing I wanted to mention in the bad. I talked about some guys on Duke being a little bit gun shy. That was not the case with Man last night, and I think he may have been a little too confident. And look, I want to be clear. I don't want to dump on a guy who dumped Gatorade all over the floor, but he took some uncharacteristically bad shots last night. Man went from the Arizona game to the Miami game, missing either 0 or 1 shots every game. This is a guy who was shooting like 85% on the season. Last night, he was 2 of 6. He airmailed that wide open three-pointer at a time when Duke was surging, and a good shot might have really put State in a state of panic. He took several shots in the paint where it felt to me like he got the ball and he said, I need to shoot on this possession, as opposed to I'm in a good position to finish off this shot. Look, he now has a total of 4 points in his last 2 games. It has been 4 games since he reached the free throw line for a single free throw. He's getting boards. He's hitting the boards nicely. He's always intimidating on defense. But frankly, Duke is not finding him the way we were earlier in the season. There was a little stretch in there where he was getting 4, 5, 6 dunks a game, it felt like. And I think maybe he was pressing a little bit last night, getting the ball and sort of thinking his only option would be to shoot. And it just bothered me a little bit. Really close game. I was nitpicking at everything. There were just a couple times I saw him take a shot and I was like, man, that's not your shot. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. You didn't become an 80+% shooter by taking that shot.
Yeah, I think pressing is the key here. I don't know that it's a slump. And look, if a slump is like shooting 62% or whatever it is, then sign me up, right? Because he was shooting 85%, getting to that point. But
yeah, although he was 2 of 6 yesterday.
2 of 6, right? But like I think if you think about it, it's more about the usage, right? If you're gonna have a low usage guy, you want to have him be a high percentage shooter when you use him. That is the key here for Man. And I think, again, put everything aside. I think he leaves this whole game in the past. I hope so. And then moved on. Really quick, the one last thing I wanted to mention is our threes, going back to our threes. We hit 4 threes, you mentioned, which is a low number, but it was only by 2 people, and really it was only by 1. Khan had 3 of them. Cooper had the one where he got fouled. But we need to see if we want to get the shot distribution going back. We need to get some of these guys back off of their shootings, out of their shooting slump, and hitting a couple. Again, we don't need everybody to be hitting 5, 6 threes a game. That would be cool, but we don't need that. It's good to have a couple of guys hitting 2 or 3 a game just to make sure that you're spreading the defense even that much more. So again, hopefully we can bring that back on Saturday. Let's get to the play of the game. Jason, there's a few interesting picks here. Which one's yours?
Score was 68-64 with about a minute and a half left in the contest. Cooper Flagg drove the lane, and the whole world, every single person watching that game thought he was about to put up a shot, except for Cooper Flagg. He saw Patrick Gongba diving to the rim right next to him. They're almost running parallel to each other. Now, The state defense, of course, is paying a little bit of attention to Cooper Flagg, the future player of the year, the guy who had 28 points. And as a result, Cooper's able to drop that ball off to Pat for such a smooth layup by the big fella. And that gave Duke a 6-point lead. It felt like that was the ball game. And I just want to, first of all, it's worth noting the shot clock was almost done. So there was like, there was not time for Pat to like balance himself
to come down. Yeah.
It had to be in one motion. And I just thought for Coop, and it's weird for me, Coop is so young. He's the youngest guy on the team. He's I think the second youngest guy in all of college basketball. But I'm going to say this anyway. For him to trust his young teammate, Patrick Gongba, for one of the plays of the year, to me, what was a big deal. And if you had Patrick Gongba making the winning play in a tense ACC dogfight in the realm of possibility for this game, if that's what you thought was how this game was going to end up, please go buy a lottery ticket right now. You need to be playing the lottery. You need to be going to Vegas because you are seeing things that I never in a million years thought was going to happen.
That is the smart play of the game. I'm going to go fun. Con Knipple holding down Tyrese Proctor to keep him from falling out of bounds. That's my play of the game. It was important in the moment.
It was a big moment.
It was a big moment. It's obviously something that a lot of people are going to remember, but sometimes you need to have a play that's kind of quirky to be the play of the game. Because again, it's one thing if he did it and they went and lost this game. It became a pivotal moment in this game because of when it occurred and what had happened in a minute previous to that kind of led to that particular moment being so important. So I'm gonna go with that. But the play from Coop to Pat was absolutely one of the smart plays of the year and also just one of the great plays of the game.
Hey, really fast before we go, full props to NC State. I mean that. This is a team that's had a frustrating year. They've not been as good as they expected to be. And they came out, they battled. I was super impressed that when Duke went on that big run, I think it was 17 point run, 17-0 run at the end of the first, start of the second to take the lead. I would have bet a lot of money at that moment that Duke was going to extend that lead and keep on building it, and it was going to get out to 15 plus points. And that never happened. NC State kept on fighting back, kept on, looking to unlikely people and making it work. They deserve a lot of credit. And I'm sure that they are wondering today, where has that NC State team been most of the year? Because that NC State team that played last night, that's a team that could contend for the tournament. This wasn't a game where Duke played terrible. The final score is terrible. The result compared to what was expected against a bad NC State team is terrible. But NC State really rose to the occasion. And I just wanted to give them a hat tip to say, thanks for giving us a contest. But guys.
Yeah. Sounds familiar, Jason. We don't want it to end in what it looked like last year when it looked familiar. So, but yeah,
Duke's games against NC State lately, like even the game we won last year in Raleigh. Remember, Sean Stewart just had that incredible, like unbelievable game where he was doing everything all over the place. Like our games against them have just been crazy in recent years.
Yeah, don't want to see it again. I'm not that I have full respect for them. Would love to do this again next year.
Yeah, I talked a few episodes ago, like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, right before the Notre Dame game, I think. I was like, this Duke team needs more close contests. We need to, okay, all right. You heard me. I'm done. The NC State game, the Wake game, those count. Those were legitimately close contests. If Duke doesn't execute right, Duke loses those games. We did. We won. Let's go beat the crap out of Carolina now, okay? Can we do that, please?
I like your style. And on that, we're going to end it here. But before we get out of here, programming note, stay tuned to your feed all week because tomorrow we're going to start our multiple previews of the UNC game. We're going to have Brendan Marks on the show to help us with the first part. Friend of the pod. He's one of the great basketball minds out there for anything Duke, UNC, or the ACC. So stay tuned for that interview. It's great. We're gonna have a lot of great content from you or from Brendan on that. And then on Thursday, at some point, Jason and I are going to do our part. We're going to record our preview for the UNC game. So you're going to get two nice previews this week. So stay tuned to your feeds. Again, later on this week, if you have questions, topics that you or questions that you want us to answer as we approach the UNC game, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We won't get to all of them, but if there's ones that are interesting, we will obviously work them into what we talk about when we talk about the Tar Heels. But until then, he is Jason. I am Donald. This has been episode number 687. Talk to you tomorrow, folks. Now it's time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.